Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. We're going to take on a Penn 149 Mariner today, and we'll show you how to take this apart, how to service it, and how to put it back together again. Now this one's a beautiful reel. This one was sent in by John. This is an older model. It's got the trolling boats out at sea and the etched side plate. The etched side plates were early 1950s. And the 149 model is different than the 49 or the 349, the 349 being the Super Mariner. And two of them, the 49 had the chrome rings on the outside, as did the 349. The internal structure on the 49 was similar, except that it had an override. It had a double clutch here. It had a free spool release, and it also had a release that you could backpedal the reel with to fight and not use your drags. And the 349 used a bigger gear. The 349 used the gear similar to the Jigmaster, where the gearing in this one is the Long Beach series gears. So this one's a little bit slower. This one doesn't have the beauty ring on the outside, and this one does not have the override clip for the anti-reverse, so you can backpedal the reel. But still a beautiful reel nonetheless. John had asked me to tune it up, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to start with a couple of things as I start to take out the exterior pieces and parts. The first one is we're going to start by letting you know that I use a parts tray. It's nothing more than the bottom of a milk jug, but it's where all of the parts that I take off this reel are going to go. So when it's time to reassemble, I know where to find them. The second thing I'll tell you is I wear a protective glove on my non-dominant hand, my left hand. And I do that because I want to keep the oils and the like, just like here, we've got some oils on here. Keep them off of my hand as I can. I haven't found a solution where I can work and protect my my right hand, but one of these days I'm sure I will. And the last part of that is to take pictures along the way. If you don't know this reel, then pictures are going to help you to identify where those pieces and parts came from when you go to reassemble the reel. And those of you that have watched my channel know that I've got a few projects, reel in a bag projects over time, where folks have taken it apart and didn't know where the pieces went on the reassembly, or took it apart and just struggled with getting the parts back in proper order. And pictures will help you to some extent with that. So I do encourage you to take those pictures. All right, I'm laying the screws out on my deck. There's 6 cross posts and a reel seat here. And the screws from the cross posts should all be the same and be long. And the 2 screws that came from the reel seat should be shorter. Now this is a trolling reel, which is why you have that trolling scene with the boats on the back here. It's a narrow frame to avoid spool twist, but it's a big reel so that you could get the line capacity on that reel to get out there deep in terms of trolling, so that you can go a couple of 100 yards off behind your boat. And that's why this was designed this way. So if you're curious why it looks the way it does, that's it. All about fighting big fish and not twisting your reel and having a break. All right, those 2 side plate screws in the back here are shorter side plate screws. So when you go to reinstall, remember that the 2 short ones belong below. John had asked me to change out the drags. He said it's been quite some time. He probably is assuming that the original leather drag washers are in there, so I did go and I did order them, and we will be using them as part of the upgrade. So this probably looks a little familiar. It's very similar to the design on the Penn Long Beach series. If there's a difference, it's only that the bridge is bigger because, well, the diameter of the reel is a lot bigger. So inside we will find some differences, but if you're familiar with the way that Penn had made their reels, then it's fairly straightforward in terms of this, the Long Beach, the Senator models, the Baymaster models, the Beachmaster models. They all kind of had the same structure in terms of mechanical design. And that makes sense because they were all manufactured around the same period, the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. before they started changing some of those internal designs. I just loosened, I didn't remove yet, I will, the 4 side plate screws, and you'll notice I have my hand cupped. That's because there's an anti-reverse spring that is going to jump. If you aren't aware of it and don't take care of it, you will lose it. But doing it this way and taking the tension off of that bridge plate generally captures that spring either on the side plate or in the palm of your hand. And I guess we'll kind of figure out what we got here. All right, well, we have it where it's a flat spring for that anti-reverse dog, which interestingly enough was put on upside down the last time it was serviced, and I captured it right here. Now that flat spring dates this reel pre-1957, because by 1957 Penn had switched over all of its flat springs to the coil springs. So if you have a flat spring, that's kind of a dating method there. I have a big old main gear here. Take that whole assembly off. And we do have the old leather washers in it, so John was right in thinking that those washers had not been updated, and we're going to go ahead and take care of that. In servicing the bridge, you want to remove the gear sleeve, and to do that there's a pin that holds it in. I use a little piece of an awl or pointed kind of a thing to start getting that pin out, and then I pull the pin the rest of the way with a pair of pliers until I clear the ridge. And this is the ridge that pin rides in. So if you're just curious, if you're trying to figure out how to get that sleeve off, well, that's how you do it. And you certainly want to do that because that's a great place to trap old grease, bog down the performance of the reel. And also, if you don't take that off, it accumulates down here. The same problem persists. It will slow the reel down. I just was able to wipe that off with a paper towel because there's nothing stuck there. It's just accumulated. And so I'm going to put a nice little coating of grease on, and we're going to push that right back in. You can, if you like, if you think that there's anything accumulated in there, just put a little bit of penetrating oil into the center of that where the shaft is going to ride. Take a Q-tip, clean that out. There was a little bit, it wasn't much of anything in there, but that's certainly a way to complete the service there. Then I'm going to turn that around. I'm going to use my pliers again to push down or pull down on that pin. And when you do that, make sure it clears the shoulder here, otherwise you won't be able to get your main gear back on. Speaking of that main gear, there's a red hard washer which goes on below. And we're going to push those drag washers out now from behind. And in this case, they're leather, they're brittle, and it's time to replace them. I'm going to use that same Q-tip that I just used. Get any kind of dirt and grease off of here. And check the teeth of this gear. You can use a hard bristle brush, a toothbrush. In this case I'm using a brass wire brush, just to make sure that there's nothing accumulated in there that's going to slow the performance of the reel or make it run erratic. And then we can get some grease on there. Now, you don't have to get it all in every tooth. When that thing spins around, it will get into all of the teeth over time. Then push down on that gear. And now it's time to kind of service the drag washers. We're going to get the old ones out of the way. They are brittle. They're stuck. And they're no longer of any use. Make sure that the washers are clean and smooth and not pitted. These are in good condition, considering that those were stuck on there. But if you need to, you can take some steel wool. In this case, it's 4-0 steel wool. That's the least abrasive of all of them. And it'll shine it right back up simply by just kind of using it. You could use a metal polish on there if you found that there was a problem with it. But in this case, those are nice and relatively clean. All right, I'm going to go get 3 drag washers then that are replacements. As I mentioned, this is the same setup as the Long Beach series, and it uses a Model 60 drag washer. These are the HT100s, and I like to coat them with drag grease. In this case, it's Cal's Universal Drag Grease. If you don't have that, if you only have the Penn Real Grease, you can certainly use that. I use my gloved hand as a tool. I put the drag grease on, I rub it into the drag washer, and then I wipe off excess. There's two different types of drag washers. There's a keyed washer, which kind of looks rectangular, and then there's an eared washer, which has a circle in the center and 2 points. The eared washer always goes in the center of the drag stack on a three drag setup. There's others out there where you have double eared washers, 2 of them, and 3 of the others. Well, I can't go in the center of that one, but that would be like on a 320, for example. Okay, the eared washer goes in the middle. There's 2 grooves in this main gear. Probably see them better now that the washer's in. That's where those little prongs belong. They belong in that slot. And we'll do it one more time with that last drag washer. We're going to put our last of the keyed washers on, and then there's a cap washer that goes above, and we can get these old washers away. They're not going to do anybody any good. All right, I'm going to just put the cap on that and set that to the side. Now I'm going to deal with the top end of this, which has the yoke and the pinion gear. You want to push down on this. You want to make sure that you're in free spool mode, which you want to bring it up, and then grab the 2 yoke springs, and we're just going to clean this out. So this reel's been oiled. It hasn't been greased, as best I can tell. There's just a light coating of oil there. This is a very clean reel, and so you don't really need to do too much. There's a bit of dust or something up top here. We'll get that out. Otherwise, it's a very nice reel overall. Take the opportunity with your sidebars off. Just clean up the side plate if it needs it. We have some old oil on the yoke, so let's get that. Make sure that's clean. Looks like trying to find a little steel wool. Here it is. There's a little bit of accumulation on there, so I'm going to use the steel wool just as I did on the other piece to get the old stuff off that. Shines up beautifully. You can see on the back here, and that will slow the performance of the reel. So we've got that out of the way. Let's check the gear here. We're doing the same thing, making sure that the teeth are not chipped or bent or cracked in any way. They're fine. There's some discoloration, but overall that's not anything that needs to be worried about. I'm going to get grease onto the shoulders of the yoke. They call it a yoke because it looks just like what an oxen might be dragging around in a field pulling a plow. And we'll get sure we get a nice healthy coat of grease onto the gear. All right, I set the 2 springs to the side here. Those springs belong in the cavities on both sides of this. I'm going to use my grease brush to get some grease into that side plate bearing and also on the shoulder of it inside there. Then we can put our yoke assembly with the pinion gear back in. There's a slot in this pinion gear. Make sure that it's facing you. That's going to accept the shoulder on the spool. It's going to make that turn. If you turn it around, which is easily done on that spool gear, you won't have a spool that engages. So a bit of grease onto the eccentric. Hook this over, and then just kind of bring it down if you like. Make sure that it's working, and that's how we found it. All right, we're just kind of coming around the circle here now. There's 2 different types of bridge screws. There's a fully threaded bridge screw. I'm probably looking at my arm right now. Fully threaded bridge screw and a partially threaded bridge screw. The partially threaded ones are where the springs ride. The fully threaded ones belong below. And we're going to start the assembly of the bridge by pushing this in and turning this about halfway. This is where your anti-reverse dog is going to come in. You're going to take a fully threaded screw. In the bottom, this was in upside down. Yeah, you can see how it was being worn because it was the wrong way. It goes this way with the flat side in. And then I just use a pick to make sure that I'm intersecting with the teeth on that gear sleeve. And we have our flat spring. So the flat spring normally would ride up against the case. In this situation, that case is way too big for the spring, so they've actually put a slot here where it rides. So you're going to put it on top of the dog first, and then you're going to twist it around so that it rests inside this slot here. So that's your anti-reverse dog with the flat spring. Oops, we just kind of shot out of there a little bit. So let's get that done again. Got lucky there because sometimes that spring winds up in the next town if you aren't careful. Okay, let's try this again. Rotate. All right, push down when you see that the screw is in that hole there. Partially tighten it. Don't tighten it all the way because the bridge needs to be aligned with the other screw holes before you can tighten them all down. Partially threaded screw goes up top on the other side. Start that one. Fully threaded screw goes below on that side. Partially threaded screw up on the other side, and then you can tighten your bridge down. You don't want it to bind or get out of the way. So tighten one side, come over to the other side, sort of north, south, east, west. That'll help keep the tension the right way. And while I'm doing this, I want to thank our first responders and emergency personnel and frontline folks that are helping us in this pandemic. All of your efforts truly are appreciated. You know who we are, and we know who you are. And thank you for all it is that you do. Really appreciate that. If you're enjoying this, I would ask you to subscribe. Certainly like the video. Subscribe to see more. And if you do subscribe, please hit the notification button so that you see when I post. And that's been something I've been trying to do on a daily basis during the pandemic, just to kind of keep us all sane. But I do all kinds of reels, not just the pen reels. And I am constantly posting all different variety of reels. And if you want to see those, please subscribe and hit those notifications. I just did the same thing on this side that I did on the other. I put some grease into that bearing. I'm going to reinstall the spool here now. Now this is a lightweight spool, which is a little unusual for the trolling reel because of the tension that these take. But again, this was the, if you will, the value piece of this line. Didn't have the trim rings and had the plastic or Bakelite spool. But interestingly enough, if you're going to cast with this reel, that's the spool you want because it's lightweight, and you would throw that further. All right, I'm going to reinstall the side plate now. To do that, I like to push this into the free spool. That takes the tension off the spool here. And then we're going to do the same thing we did with that bridge. We're just going to start north, south, east, west. So we'll put one into the top here. Not lined up. Get it started. Now these are dual posts. It gives extra strength to the frame. Put one into the bottom here to get that centered. And that's the short screw. Remember, there's 6 of one size and 2 short ones. The short one goes in the bottom on that reel seat. Here's another for this side. Now folks ask about using a mechanical screwdriver, battery operated or electric. I don't recommend those, especially on a reel like this. You can shatter the pieces or you can over torque them. They do have a tremendous amount of torque. If you need that because you don't have the hand strength, then go ahead and use them, but leave the screw short like this and then just finish the last turn down with your hands if that's possible. Switch over here. So these are nice reels, like I mentioned, they're in the series, and this one is a lower speed one, and it'll take you an awful long time to bring all that line in if that's what you've got out there. So Penn went to the 349, which is the higher speed version of this reel, and became probably the more desired one. Here's a look at the two screws to see the difference in length. That shorter screw is the one that belongs on the bottom. So if you have questions about this reel or any reel in particular, I'm not going to tell you I'm the expert on everything. I'm not going to tell you I'm an expert at all. I just learned a lot. And if that qualifies you to be an authority, that's okay. But I've never had the formal industry expertise, if you will, to tell you everything about these reels. But I do know that if you have a question and if I've experienced that reel or that type of situation, I'm going to try and help you. Just leave that in the comments. Sometimes it's, what's the sequence? How do I set a spring? How do I determine what's wrong with a particular reel because something's not working? And I'll be happy to try and give you an answer that'll get you back on track. All right, now that I have them all in, now I can tighten them down, and I'm doing the same thing, kind of reversing my sequence, right? I'm down here, come back up top, tighten that one down, go to the other side, tighten that one down. Grab the sleeve. Here's our adjuster. Trying to get a little bit of that grease off the case here. Take our handle screw. And when you're putting that handle screw on back, you make sure your drag goes down. You don't want to press your handle into that star adjuster or it'll just jam and it won't work. I'm going to use my wrench here. Some folks have asked what this wrench is. It's an Allen Tanny wrench. It's available at mysticparts.com. And if you work on a lot of Penn reels, it's a good reel wrench to have. It's a little bit thicker and a little bit longer than the one that came with the reel, and that makes it a little bit easier to work taking them on and off. All right, give it a spin. Now we'll go into gear. We want to adjust our bearing just a little bit because we put the grease in there, so that's putting a little bit more tension on the spool. And there you go, John. That's one of several that John has sent me. This is a beautiful reel. This is the Penn Mariner series. It's the number 149. As we mentioned, it's the kind of the entry level of the series. There's a 149, a 49, I believe there's a 249, and the 349. The 49 and the 349 being the more desirable of them. But that's the whole series that Penn has introduced over the years. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please like it. Again, please subscribe if you want to see more. Please stay safe, stay healthy. Listen to the folks out there and their advice on the pandemic, because we want you fixing reels for a long time. We want you out there fishing, and the best way to do that is to wear the masks, maintain social distancing, and listen for the advisories about what to do to stay safe. So this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.